Now, granted, you would be catching them kind of after the fact, but at least you're doing everything you can in a due diligence standpoint of, hey, I did everything I possibly could to protect my company, my employees, and the general public. And because there's a small window where you can still catch people that could be shedding the virus. If you test negative on these antibody tests, you probably did not have a previous infection. However, you could have a current infection. It's possible you could still get sick if you've been exposed to the virus recently, since antibodies, they don't show up for 1 to 3 weeks after the infection. So you still could spread the virus. You just got to be careful with this thing. And there's no foolproof method here, right? And one thing too, a lot of folks, we're getting this question a lot. Hey, I was sick back in January. I think Mount Airy had this big thing, and I was sick too. A lot of people I knew 4 or 5 people that had this upper respiratory virus that was going around. It was not the flu, wasn't the flu. So everybody in Mount Airy is talking about how we think that we had COVID-19 here back in December and January. These test kits, these rapid antibody test kits, will not determine that if you had it back then. They're set for about a 30-day range. So, your antibodies decline over time, and they're set to only catch that 30-day window. So if you think you had it in January, February, this test will not determine that. All right, prevent and reduce transmission among your employees. You want to actively encourage sick employees to stay home. Employees who have signs and symptoms, they need to notify their supervisor immediately, preferably before they come to work. But if at work you start to feel, any of the signs and symptoms, and there's a long list of them now, you should follow the CDC recommendations and not report to work or be isolated and sent home. Employees who are well but have a sick family member, they should probably stay at home too. Okay, remember, follow the CDC recommendations and precautions. Okay. All right, so all of this is to try to help you build the right program for your company. Some companies may be able to do all of these things that we just talked about. Some of them may only be able to do a few of these things. But the idea is to do something. So whether it's determining you need to do the new hire package or run a drug test or conduct daily health checks, questionnaires, temperature screening, COVID antibody testing, all of these things are to help you build a solid program and feel comfortable about bringing people back to work. Now, I know there's other things like spreading desks apart and putting up plexiglass. That's not my wheelhouse. But these items are. So you want to make sure you stay consistent with your policy and review all these options that are out there for you, okay, to help you build the right program. The last thing I'll say is remain consistent as you can with your policy. It's that important. You've got to be consistent across the board as well. Okay. Again, this is information from an expert of about a month and a half. I hope that you've learned something today. And Andrew, how was that one compared to last week?
It was great, man. It was really good. There were a few new things as it changes, every day. So covers a lot of stuff, but a lot of really, really good information.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions right now?
I do. I have a question. Do you see companies in the future being required to involve some level of testing in their environment to be for sure that people are protected? Do you see that being required, or is this just going to be an option always for companies?
That's a great question. Right now with the the viral testing, that's the only true way to determine if you're infected right now. It's expensive. It's not cheap, and it's difficult to do. And the question is, are you going to have to do that every single day? So if you require it, would you require it every day? So I don't see it becoming a requirement. What I feel is going to happen is folks are going to really want to start doing some type of testing. And this antibody testing is right now, while there are still a lot of FDA, guidelines and clamps on who can do it and how it can be done. I think more folks will want to do that type of due diligence as we get, especially going back into the fall and winter months. We're going to have a lull, and then it's going to pop back up, and for the next 12 to 18 months until vaccine really gets out there, people are not going to be comfortable, and there's nothing foolproof, but again, it's just performing the right level of due diligence. So I think there will be a place for these rapid antibody tests down the road, especially if the I word comes into play, immunity. Then I think there's going to be a big spike in that type of testing.
I also, I don't know if it's a question, but just as a thought, seeing it as different companies are getting back, I've noticed that there's a level of frustration on some of the companies to get back to work because they really don't know when is the best time to onboard for them. There are several circumstances like you were going through that I think need to be in place. You've got to have a detailed outline given to your employees in advance so they know what they're coming into. They have to be prepared that this is the new normal, that there may be checks at the door for digital screening of temperatures, and are they going to be okay with it, are they not? And then you have to also consider everybody's got an opinion on this, and there could be underlying health factors for folks that we don't know about that will come to light that hopefully won't affect their jobs. But I will say that it has been, at least from my vantage point, it's been very trying for companies because no one knows when is a good start time. No one knows how it's affecting someone 60 years old versus a baby, or even in between. If you're a type of blood type, for instance, if you're A blood type versus a O, it touches somebody differently and it affects somebody differently. Every person is different. So, and like, with our masks, it really doesn't protect us. We're trying to, protect
in the wash.
So I can understand everybody's level. And I think the main thing is we can't let the anxiety and frustration of this cloud our judgment of making the environment safe and getting back too soon. So I just encourage everybody to make sure you have a good game plan. Check with Michael if you want, the antibody testings. I think what you guys have got is a great system, and I really did learn a lot about this today because I don't think it's talked enough about, some of this stuff that y'all are offering. But I'm just amazed. I don't know about, with the Legacy or even with Surrey County EDP. How do y'all go about, setting up a strategy for employees? Because I know for Larry, he's got thousands and thousands of employees, and they're all affected differently because they're all across the state pretty much, or at least in a region. And then for Andrew, y'all are a confined group, but you have to go into different businesses and greet people. So I'm just curious how y'all are going about being open and stuff.
Travis, I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, we're, in our office space, we're separated and we have plenty of distance, but we are coming in and out of a public building, even though the public doesn't come back in the area where we work, we're still going through 2 sets of doors that are public doors. So that's a little different. But for example, yesterday I was invited out to 2 businesses, one new small business, and that feels good to be able to get out. It's just different everywhere. And then I'll call on someone today, and they may still be working from home or not even be there. So it's really up and down. But we're starting to see more normal, a little more back to work normalcy, and most businesses have said that employees are pretty compliant, so that might wear on them in a matter of weeks. But so far with mask and temperature checks, most employees are pretty compliant. So that's good. I will one more thing. I rounded out a survey that surveyed about 200 businesses over a few weeks about impacts of COVID and how it's affecting them. It's a short, less than 5-minute survey. It was less than 20 questions, but there are a few good takeaways from that. There were 76% said it was time to reopen fully, which I thought was kind of interesting. So three quarters of the respondents said that they were ready to fully reopen. But there's other statistics in there, and I can share that survey with you guys. It discusses supply chain interruptions, the loans, whether or not they took out the loans. More businesses actually in Surrey County that responded anyway did not, just barely over, maybe 55% did not do the PPP, and a large amount did not do the EIDL. But that was just based on the ones that responded. So that's I can share that survey with you guys.
Please. Larry?
We're mirroring and lagging behind the governor's direction on these different phases and having to do it differently by department. Russ and I are not able to go out and meet and greet, and we're looking forward to being able to get back out to the autumn leaves and things like that. But we've had departments where we had a measure of people working at home and remotely before anyway, like marketing and some different things. So we're developing a complete new strategy and phasing it back in. We've had to do some of the partitions at some of the teller pods, and spacing the desks differently in the branches, especially the larger branches. So we're having to take a building by building approach with 18 branches in the headquarters, and we're having to take a multifaceted approach based on the interactions that are required to get the job done. So there's no one thing across the board. We've got a complete committee working on that on a daily basis. So that's what people are running into. The resources I think that people are going to put into this is going to be quite a bit, and taxing, and have to be very, very fluid, very, very water-like. So there's no really good answer I can give you other than, again, following that, and just, again, somebody's got a partition, somebody's like me at home for another month. We're actually polling our companies to see where they're at too. So that's going to be a nice one as we start to reach out. We've had companies reach out to us, say, we want you to come here and do X, Y, and Z. Can you? And we are in the process of reaching out to the several hundred groups and trying to find out where they're at in their process and what they're implementing and how they want to interact in the future. So we've got a lot going on there. And we may have some good feedback in future meetings about that. But with 500 plus groups, we're going to get a complete spectrum of interactions and lack of interactions. So really looking forward to see how that comes about.